I remember a New York Times writer that once wrote that for him, growing up in New York City, the Hudson River was where the streets end. The river and the harbor were just the blue parts of the subway map. Except for the people in the Bronx, everybody in New York is an islander. It's a city of water and a city of islands. The city owes its existence and its wealth to the fact that it's on this river and part of this harbor. It is not something that I think the general New Yorker is conscious of on a day-by-day basis. I grew up on the Hudson River. My mother took me down to the beach in Irvington when I was 4 when we moved up from the Bronx. And it took until working for Riverkeeper in 2000 for me to start to really appreciate the volume of life that this river is, that it's a wilderness that runs right through the heart of our communities. It's no different than the Serengeti or the Brooks Range in Alaska. It's a tremendous wilderness, and these migratory fish that run up and down the Hudson every spring and fall are like the antelope that cross the Great Plains in Africa. It's a powerful, powerful force, the life in this river. So Riverkeepers enabled me to appreciate that, and in appreciating it, I realized that I had to fight for it. The challenge for us and the community is to get a greater number of New Yorkers to care about the harbor.
People have no concept of the island city that they're living on. You have to take bridges and tunnels to get everywhere because we're surrounded by water. And that water has been part of our city's history for 400 years. Water is life, and water is something that, not only provides jobs when you have clean, working waterfronts, but it's something that can just restore the spirit. And unfortunately, on too many of our waterways in the city, we've spent decades with polluted, oil-laden, toxic waterways that have not had that restorative benefit for their community.
Newtown Creek Alliance is a nonprofit community organization, been around for about 15 years. Our mission is to reveal, restore, and revitalize Newtown Creek, which we're motoring through today.
We absolutely believe that industry, environmental restoration, and recreation in the form of public access can all coexist on a place like Newtown Creek. The industry that's here now is not the industry of 1920. It's beyond imagination of how bad it was and how detrimental it was, not just to the environment, but to all the people's health that were living nearby in places like Greenpoint and Long Island City.
We have so much to do in Newtown Creek. Yet over the last 10 years, it's gone from something that has a daily stench that you can detect from a mile away to a place where there's dozens of people every day out there in kayaks and canoes. Businesses are popping up near the front end of the creek, and we're working together as a community to develop a whole creek-wide plan for its restored future.
I've lived here for 32 years and raised a family here. And though everybody in the community knew that it was a polluted body of water, I think that nobody could have truly imagined how polluted it was until it was declared a Superfund site. The biggest problem in the Gowanus Canal is definitely the fact that this used to be an industrial waterway and the heritage pollution that still remains to this day at the bottom of the canal. That's really the biggest problem at the moment. You know, we really need to go ahead and get it cleaned up, number one, then comes the rezoning, and as part of the rezoning, we make sure that we allow public access. Let's go for swimmable. Let's really do an amazing job. This is New York City. This is an urban area with lots of residents. Let's really do this 100% and return it to the community as a healthy body of water that they can actually use and enjoy.
Every different neighborhood in New York City has its own connection with its waterfront. So in Gowanus Canal, the investments in development and commercial and retail enterprises preceded the cleanup. And so that neighborhood started to change over before the cleanup of the canal started. But here in Newtown Creek, it's really something that is going to continue to have an industrial and manufacturing core. The question is what to do with all the ancillary properties and the communities around the less densely developed parts of Newtown Creek that really need to return that water to its clean, more natural state before there can be investments.
People don't have much relationship with the waterway because there's no encouraging place for them to get down and look at it. But it's a sort of chicken and the egg. If there's not a lot of people that care about the waterway, then it's hard for the city and all the other agencies involved to feel pressure to address it and clean it up properly.
It's amazing how quiet it can be out on the East River compared to the rest of New York City at certain times. There's absolutely part of this routine of people coming out, going out paddling. Both of it is sort of this way to get rid of stress and paddle, but also is this sort of quiet time as well. New York City has 520 miles of coastline. You could spend the rest of your life exploring the shores of New York and never get bored with it.
So New York City, like many older cities, has a combined sewer and stormwater system. Good news is, in dry weather, all the sewage goes to the sewer plants, and we measure good water quality in terms of fecal contamination. When it rains, because it's an old city, lots of rainwater, by design, still goes into the sewer system. So you can imagine what happens at the sewer plants. The sewer plants and the plumbing carrying that combined stormwater and sewage to the plants overloads. And when we measure the harbor during and after rain, it's full of sewage. If every drop of oily ground is cleaned up, if every seep of oil, if every bit of coal tar in the Gowanus is cleaned up, we haven't achieved success if the city's still using the harbor as a sewer during rain events when the sewer system overloads.
As an academic scientist, I do field work and I spend a lot of time in my laboratory. What's been so unique about this relationship is the opportunity to get out on the water. We put together an initial study to try to answer the question, how's the water? Gathering information about water quality, especially sewage pollution, fecal pollution. There are lots of places where what we find actually is really good water quality. We're circled right now by places where last week in heavy rain, there was sewage, rivers of sewage entering this system. And of course, the water quality is not very good then. But the bacterial component of that actually clears out so that during periods of dry weather, the water quality can be quite good. New York City is a city that's surrounded by water, and we don't take advantage of it nearly as much as we could. There's a lot of people who have kind of written off the Hudson. They've written off the system as one that they wouldn't want to come into contact with. I'm amazed when I talk to students in my classes or when we talk to people along the water that there's not an appreciation for the way in which the system becomes contaminated and therefore the ways in which we can improve the system.
I'd fallen in love with the Hudson River in a way that was totally unexpected for me. And I just was amazed at how being given the responsibility for helping take care of this particular ecosystem had turned on the learning in my brain so much. And I thought, I wonder if a school wouldn't do the same thing. Why do you have to wait until you're after school to actually do real work helping study, research, protect, and restore water bodies? And so a little light bulb went off then that this is what schools should look like. And really, that's what the harbor schools tried to be. So we actually designed our curriculum around river keepers and water keepers. A river keeper has to be equal parts scientist, advocate, technician working on the boats. They have to be able to drive boats. They have to be able to communicate to the public.
I just want to know about the ecosystem, the environment, what's happening, what I can do to fix it. And I believe, especially coming from the middle of Brooklyn, no one knows that. No one knows about what's going on out here in our efforts. So we want to push forward into the community, especially the inland community, to be like, hey, this is what we're doing out here. We want you to join in and don't be left out.
But we still didn't have something for all of the kids to work on together. We built this entire school around New York Harbor, and yet it was still a really degraded, inaccessible, polluted water body. And so we were asking ourselves, what role does a school have in helping restore New York Harbor? A key part of that was that we'd been participating in New York, New Jersey Baykeepers' oyster gardening effort. And in 2008, Pete Malinowski came to start volunteering for us. He'd grown up on the Fisher's Island oyster farm. And pretty quickly he said, we shouldn't just be talking about oyster gardening, we should be talking about oyster farming.
Most people don't think about New York Harbor or New York City as being an important natural place. But when Europeans first arrived, they encountered a harbor that was completely full of life. So many fish that you could catch them just by lowering a basket over the side of a boat. Oyster reefs played an important role in supporting all of that life. The numbers you hear are 300 square miles of oyster reef just in New York Harbor. Our premise is that restoring 1 billion oysters is the level of intervention that's necessary to get the oysters to a point where they can reproduce on their own. Oysters filter the water. They provide three-dimensional habitat for thousands of species of fish and invertebrates. And if you put a cage, just a very simple wire box filled with live oysters on the bottom attached to cinder blocks, and come back in a few weeks, you'll just see thousands of different animals. A little bit of three-dimensional structure, oysters pulling food out of the water and putting it on the bottom, and you just get this explosion of living things. Anyone who grows up in a natural place has some fundamental connection to the natural world that changes who they are and how they interact with everything they do. Finding ways to create that connection for young people who would not have had that opportunity otherwise is a fundamental part of our work.
New York City is a world capital, and I really believe that if we can pull off clean water here in New York Harbor, if we can show that a bustling, old, prosperous, dense city can live in harmony with the waters that surround it, and that the waters can be healthy for wildlife and aquatic life and healthy for recreation. If we can show that here in New York, other cities will take notice.
It used to be that the waterways in New York City were forgotten, ignored, reviled, you name it. Now, they're getting the love they deserve, and they're getting the love they deserve because of groups like Riverkeeper and all of our partner organizations that are out on the river protecting it. So even the water bodies that are still the most blighted, your Gowanus canals, your Newtown creeks, they're coming back too. And that's the biggest turnaround.
We're the DCH Dragon Boat Club here in Flushing Bay. Comprises of high school kids and working professionals, kids from really all 5 boroughs. This is Mother Nature here, so we would like a better solution to make this place healthier and beautiful. The community has gotten involved. It has gotten better within the last 2-3 years with the Riverkeeper and with the Guardians of Flushing Bay.
The Guardians of Flushing Bay hold an annual cleanup every year, and we try to help out, try to clean up a bit, because we do paddle in this water. We want it to be the best for us and the fish. Poor little fish.
When I was growing up, places like Flushing Bay, they were not places where you could go out on the water safely and enjoy yourself. We want people connected to our waterways. This is a city on the water. This is an opportunity to commune with nature. This is an opportunity to work up a sweat by paddling. You see people out here cleaning up their shorelines. People are taking pride of their waterways. There's been 3,000 or 4,000 people who became river keepers during that process. They'll always be there for the river, and we'll have people understanding why they call New York City's waterways the 6th borough.